Good afternoon, my name is TorLow, and this is my final metacognitive reflection examination submission for EDUC565 with Professor Amy Burton for the Spring 2017 Sierra Nevada College semester. I'm going to first go over the learning targets for the course and describe how and why I've made progress towards mastering those. And then I'm going to go ahead and identify my personal learning goal and how I've made progress towards achieving that as well. So if you'll bear with me, here we go. So the first learning target that we identified in class was the teacher candidate will be able to manage and monitor student learning. So I'm going to explain how I have made growth towards mastering this learning target. But first I'm going to reflect back on what progress I've made since the midterm. So what I thought during the midterm for my last video submission, I mentioned I learned that record keeping in Excel is a great way to manage and monitor the student learning. I also learned about seating charts, how you can seat your students to be the most effective for listening and participating in your class, not having any backs towards you as you're lecturing, and how you can pick a good place but also practice teacher with itness by walking around, kind of like having eyes in the back of your head. And I learned that through Jackie Page's video where she was doing the Coca-Cola and Mentos experiment, and students are coming in late because it's the first week of school, dealing with locker issues, but then she's also getting the students going with the lesson, keeping them engaged, holding their attention, and encouraging full class participation while doing all these other things at the same time. So that's kind of what I explained to help me make progress towards this learning target for the midterm. But since the midterm, I've made progress through learning how to create a classroom management plan. I learned about all the different sections you need to include in your classroom management plan, and I learned what each of those sections mean and how they're going to influence your teaching and the way you do things in the class. So table 5.3 is what I'm kind of specifically referring to in Burden, the classroom management book. But I learned the importance of the different sections of this, the classroom management plan, such as, how you're going to start your class, how you're going to do the transitions between activities, how you're going to leave or end class, the different ways you're going to pass out, materials, or how you're going to collect work. So what was most effective in me learning this, I think, was sitting in the small groups and workshopping our plans that we had brought in. I thought this was very influential and very effective to understanding what goes into a management plan and the different ways you can design your management plan, because you only understand your personal experiences. You are your experiences in that sort of way. So what has worked for you in the classroom as a student, is most likely going to be how you're going to design your management plan. But in talking to my peers and listening to their reasonings as to why they did certain things, or what was important to them in their plans and what they wanted to bring into their classroom as far as procedures and rules, was very interesting because it provided me with an alternative view of how to do things. And so I think I learned a lot from my students, and also they gave me some really good critical feedback, as did you, Amy, on section 4. So that was another way I learned how I learned this, was through the feedback you gave me specifically on turning in late work, or if you are absent for a day. I'm not very well versed in that sort of area of teaching, and so I just kind of referred to the traditional packet method. Students could pick up a packet prior or after they were absent and fill that out to make up their work that they missed. You said that this was a little bit more, it's hard to do, students lose the packets, packets get torn up, or they might not get them until later, and then it just adds to more busy work and more things they have to fill out. Whereas you suggested maybe doing like a online classroom platform type thing that would be a little bit more effective for them. So that was really cool. Let's see what else. I also learned how to manage and monitor student learning through the lesson planning. The lesson planning was a big one, and we reflected on it the last class that we just did about the process of how you introduced it to us, how you just let us, just try it the first time around, the draft number 1, certain sections of it, and then, we came back in and we talked about it and the different, went through the different sections, and now we've had it'll soon be our 3rd draft that we're going to turn in tomorrow for this, and I think I've learned a lot with the lesson planning. It is definitely an art that you're going to master. I don't know if you are really able to master it, excuse me, but it's something that you can definitely work towards throughout your entire career of teaching, and it's definitely something that I am still very much a beginner at, but I think how I learned this and how I learned the most out of the activity of designing your lesson plan was the workshopping of the lesson plans, of the example plan that you provided us in class, how we went through each section of it as a group, and we identified which NEPF standard it was referring to and how it was supporting that. It provided me with a clearer understanding of each of the sections and what I needed to include, and why I was including it. So that was really meaningful for me. I took a lot away from that. Let's see. I also learned I learned the term understanding by design, and that's a way that you can design. It's a framework that you can design your lesson plans around, which makes sure that your understanding and the activities that you actually do in your lesson plan provides it contributes to the big picture learning goal, and you make sure that you're very much designing things with that big picture in mind. You're not just doing this, well, what's the point of this? Why are we doing this? And how are we doing this? How is this going to contribute to our ultimate goal that we identified? So I learned understanding by design through the Jay McTighe, I hope I pronounced his name right, but Jay McTighe YouTube video. His video made me understand that you need to make sure your instruction is focused on the understanding and the transfer of ideas. So if students can understand the concepts and understand how they learned it, then they can be more effective in their future learning, but also they can transfer that ideas across to other subjects. So it's not just compartmentalized in that one area, but you can kind of cross-transfer of ideas throughout your whole schooling experience, education experience. This is going to inform my future teaching, as I don't believe that, I think it's so easy for teachers to design their lesson plans around just getting through the content, but rather I think what I've learned from this class and what I've learned from all these activities is that it's so important to make sure that each unit and each lesson is engaging for my students, and that you're providing different ways of learning, through differentiated instruction, but as well as, applying it to past learning, future learning, and how this is why we're learning this, how this is going to contribute to the overall goal. Let me just look here real quick. And essentially, I really want to be able to encourage creative and critical thinking in my students, so that they're motivated to, not just understand the ideas, but then, like I said, bring those ideas forward and apply them to other subjects, and to kind of link it and make the connections to increase critical thinking, I think is very important. So I think I've definitely been empowered, and I have made progress towards the mastery of this learning target, and I think it's been really fun. That was probably the learning target that I looked forward to learning about the most, and I think I've made the most progress for learning target number 1 in understanding how to manage and monitor student learning. Thanks. The second learning target is the teacher candidate will be able to explore and practice instructional planning that supports every student in meeting rigorous learning goals in a managed learning environment informed by the NEPF. So I'll reflect first on what I had learned at the midway point or for my midterm submission, and that was I gained a basic understanding of the different classroom control approaches, and I had learned a lot through the post-it note activity we did in the beginning, whether we thought we were going to be in the high, medium, or low control. And I also reflected on how I previously thought that having high control was a negative way. To me, I just always associated it with a negative way of teaching because I personally have never identified with that way and also done very well in that type of classroom. But through the activities we had done in the first part of class, the first part of this course, I had learned more the necessity of having different control approaches at different times, depending on your students, depending on the time of day, depending on the activity. So I learned a lot through that. I also learned, through Marzano's chapter 6 and Burton's chapter 2 on the modes of discipline. And then also Professor Dweck and the fixed versus growth mindset video was super influential for me for understanding the power of yet and the ability to grow and learn and make mistakes, but move on and move forward and progress. And maybe you haven't learned that yet, but you're still capable of being able to do this. So, and how important it is to have a growth mindset in your classroom. I also learned a lot through the Voices in the Park video that we did, and learning how the same situation can be interpreted in so many different ways by the different perspectives and the different types of people. So that was really powerful in my learning. But since the midterm, I've learned even more and made more progress towards achieving this learning target. And that would be, again, through the process of lesson planning, and specifically with going through the lesson plan with, going through the lesson plan and identifying the NEPF standards that we did with the group activity. Like I said in the first learning target, I think these two kind of blend together with the regards to lesson planning, because you're learning how to manage a monitor, but you're also learning what's the most effective for your students. And so being able to identify and understand the different standards and see how they can be applied through the different areas in your lesson plans and your instruction is very important. And I think I learned the most through this was going through the workshops and planning and talking and kind of listening to my fellow students and my desk mates and how they saw and interpreted the standards. So the next thing that I have learned is the importance of being how to be effective in your teaching subjects through identifying the objectives and how we're going to make progress towards them, and also the relevancy of each of these objectives in your teaching. The students, they want to have their learning validated, and they want to understand what's the point. A lot of them are, why am I learning this? What is this going to contribute to? And what does this have to do with anything that we've been doing in class? And so, I learned this and how important it is through a number of ways, but it's also number one was, how you've done it with each of your classes. And we're going to work towards this target, and this is how we're going to do this, and this is how it's going to influence that, and we're doing this because of this, and this connects to this past and to the future learning that we're going to do. So it really provides that relevancy for what we were doing. So you were a really good example with that, with all your PowerPoints and your explanations in class. Another way that I've learned this is through the classroom management scenario analysis, which was where the teacher was just going through the motions, and we had to read and annotate the scenario. And I think I didn't learn the most from reading and annotating. I just did a lot of underlining of things that sounded pretty outrageous to me, and I can't believe she's doing this, and things that I felt weren't right. But I think I learned the most from our discussions, which, as you'll hear me as I refer to the different activities and how I've learned something, I think the overall theme in this class was I've learned the most just from listening to my fellow students contribute, and then different questions and ideas that you've posed, Amy, has been the most effective. But the classroom management scenario and feedback was huge, incremental in learning this, and the importance of tying the lessons into your past and future lessons, and giving the full reasoning as to why we are doing this. So the next thing that I've learned is how to make your instruction the most effective for your students in attaining the rigorous learning goals. And that is through different things like the Freyer method of vocabulary study that we've learned. I don't know if you can see that. Yep. So that's going into, you identify, you need to provide a solid framework for what you're learning and the concepts and the different subjects or units. And so if you can, start out by not only explaining how this ties into everything and the relevancy of it, but also giving the good foundation through identifying key vocabulary words. And that's exactly what the Freyer method provides. It's the, you get the method, you have the definition, the characteristics and the facts, the examples and the non-examples. I think it's a very useful way of incorporating and identifying certain vocabulary words that are very important to the unit or to your instruction. And another way that I have learned to be more effective in my teaching is through the depth of knowledge, the DOK levels, as well as the Bloom's taxonomy. So it just kind of starts with the different steps and how you can start from remembering what it actually is, understanding what it is, applying it to different situations, how you can use the information, analyzing it, how do you distinguish between the different parts of it, evaluating it, and then eventually creating it. So, I think you can apply that to any one of your lessons in the classroom, and I plan to use that to inform my instruction in the future. So those were really effective ways I've learned how to be more successful in my teaching methods in the future with my students. Let's see here. Lastly, I've learned the importance of creating a fail-safe classroom, an atmosphere where it's failure is accepted and promoted and understood, and it's okay to make mistakes. I think oftentimes school is so performance-based, or it has been traditionally, and so I think I've learned the importance through the children's books activity we did in class, where we read the 4 different books out loud in our groups, and then we had some discussion questions afterwards, and we spoke with our group mates on how this can inform your teaching. But I think that was really effective because I learned that you need to be able to create that atmosphere where it's okay to fail, so that students feel like they're not afraid to try or to get involved. And that's the whole point of school. What's the point in going to school? You can ask this to your students. What's the point in going to school if you know everything already? So I think we go to school so that we can make mistakes, and I think it's important to encourage your students to understand that by making mistakes, we actually are using a more influential method of learning to understand a concept, because you have that personal connection with it. You failed. Oh, I remember that time I did it wrong, but I have experienced how I've learned it. I know what works. I know what's right now, and I have that personal experience or time that I can relate to that. So I think it's a very great way of learning, and I think all students should not be afraid to fail or to try something new or to make mistakes, because that's how we learn. Another way that I have made progress towards learning target number 2 was through Dr. Randall Sprick's CHAMPS acronym tool, which is Conversation, Help, Activity, Participation, and Success. It's different ways of managing and controlling an activity in your classroom and how you're going to introduce it. But then also the STOIC handout and acronym you gave us. I won't go through each one because obviously you know this and I know this, it's right here. But this was a really great thing to help remind us the different things that you want to consider when you're planning your instruction and how you can be the most effective in managing. So I think this handout was very useful, and I learned a lot from that as well that I plan to use to inform my instruction. The third learning target is the teacher candidate will be able to reflect critically and systemically about their practice and learn through collaborative inquiry informed by research-based criteria. So during my midterm video submission, I came to the point for the first half of class that I understood, again, more of the foundation for this and how to be able to reflect critically and systemically. And that was, I've learned that through the PLC article and the discussion that followed in understanding exactly what a PLC is and how to take advantage of learning about the past experiences from my fellow classmates, the importance of collaborative teacher expertise through Hattie's talk and research. I also took away, the importance of metacognitively reflecting and what it means and, what you do during that. But I also mentioned that I would adjust my teaching styles and methods to better fit my students and to, like I said, not underestimate the effect and the power of the past experiences that your teachers have and how you can learn and grow from that and how it can influence your own teaching. So that was really neat to learn, but I think that was a great foundation and I understood what it was, but I think I've made significantly more progress in the second half of the class through a number of different ways. So since the midterm, I've learned, like I previously said, the importance of how to reflect and how to be metacognitive about your teaching practice and about learning in general. But I think I learned more of exactly what constitutes a full reflection. It's not just the what was it and how I learned it. It's more like what was the most effective way and what did I enjoy, what resonated the most, what proved to be the most successful, and identifying the exact factors of what's working for you, what helped you learn and how. And I think a big one for that was I think it was the Sprick, or maybe it was the McTighe video, but basically it was about the soccer team and how his daughter was playing on the soccer team, and the coach comes in at halftime and is asking them, all right, so what's working for us? What are we doing well? And nobody could identify that. And I thought that really was powerful to me, because I think that's such a question that students need to learn how to reflect. You can know what reflecting is, but the actual practicing the act of doing that and being able to verbalize those specific factors that are contributing to your success and what isn't working for you, and what, not only identifying it, but being able to have that influence your learning and influence the process of attaining the knowledge in your classroom or learning the subject or mastering the art, whatever it is. So I think through that video, it really helped me learn this. And I think I learned and practiced this a bunch. Every class we did with you, Amy, with the personal reflections after each of the discussions on Edmodo that we do. And I really liked participating in those because I think it gave me a chance to really verbalize and to, in order for me to learn, like I've identified earlier in this video, I need to be able to talk about it with my peers. I need to solidify the ideas, but then not only being able to verbalize it, but also to be able to write it out, I think helps me very much solidify the concrete subjects, or solidify each little thing. And so it helps me remember it. It helps put it into the thought process and save it in the bank for later to influence my teaching. So the Edmodo, that was how I learned it, being able to practice that. And I made comments, a couple of times to you, Amy, that I felt like, I don't have enough time. And, because I'm still perfecting the art of reflecting on these types of learning experiences and the different activities that we did. But, I get so inspired and I get so into it that I want to keep going. And I think it was a really good practice. I know that for the sake of moving class along and to get things going, you had to limit it to a certain amount of time. But I did really appreciate, the practice and being more concise. And obviously through this video, it's a great exercise as well, because I know I definitely need to work on that. Okay, moving on. I think another thing that really helped me learn how to reflect critically and professionally in front of my peers is listening to the Rita Pearson's talk, and how she did, what your mama said, and how she spoke about it, and she was very concise, and she was very specific in the factors and why she did the certain things and how she explained it to the fellow teachers that were listening to her. So I really enjoyed that. That definitely taught me a lot. The next one is, I mentioned before the midterm, or during my midterm submission, that I learned what a PLC was. But through the second half of class, we practiced it a number of times, and we went through and had the list of the norms and the practices and the behaviors that would contribute to a successful PLC. And I think it was very influential for me to actually participate in one of those, and having the person speaking, and then one person practicing active listening, and then paraphrasing and asking questions to verify, and being respectful and inclusive of everyone, and participating in the discussion. It was very neat to be a part of, and I think that I will absolutely take this with me when collaborating with other teachers, and also just working with students when they're speaking and reflecting and learning in the classroom. I think it's very important to always exhibit those behaviors, and that's how you become an active member of a conversation. So practicing the PLCs was definitely another thing that helped me develop the successful behavior and understand what it takes to have a successful PLC. I think the activity where we learned and we practiced how to read the research tables was very effective in learning how to reflect critically and systemically on research-based criteria. I think one of the things, and this too because I've mentioned this in certain comments on Emodo, but just the sheer wow, I can't believe a student said that when they referred to the research being unnecessary. And I think they might not have even understood exactly what they were saying, and maybe they were just tired or didn't really get the full effect of what they were communicating. But I learned a lot actually from that, because I learned, I knew it already how important research was, but I learned how important it is to communicate those concepts, because there's so many things that you would think is so common sense or so obvious, but a lot of times people aren't thinking towards the reasonings behind it. And so I think the practicing the research tables and having those conversations about about how necessary research is, was super effective. And I think it was very insightful to learn about I think it was very insightful to learn how people interpret it as well. So that was pretty neat. That definitely stayed with me. And I think another way that I have learned is through the panel that came in and talked to us. I loved that. I thought that was amazing. It's not every day that you get the opportunity to be able to ask your potential employers or people in the same position as another potential employers these questions without really sounding ignorant or without it was a comfortable environment, and I thought the whole class took a lot away from that. It made me feel a lot more comfortable with the process. By understanding it, I wasn't as scared or as shy to the process. It helped me become a little bit more helped me understand what it was, and so I really enjoyed that. I learned that one of the biggest issues that those I forget the couple's name, Paula and I think the Zonas, maybe. I'm sorry, but one of the biggest issues that they had communicated was that they saw in future teachers was the teachers not using the resources that are available to them, and actually reading the procedures and the rules about the school, and using those resources that are available to them. So I think that's going to absolutely inform my future teaching, because I'll put more emphasis on understanding the whole process of certain things within the school system for that particular school, doing the research behind the school and why I want to work there, and also being able to tap into those resources that are available to me as a new new teacher. So I think that is very valuable and will absolutely help me in the future. I've learned so much in trying to master and trying to work towards these 3 learning targets, and it's been very memorable and it's been very insightful to learn through all the different ways, different activities, the discussions, and the assignments. It's been really fun. So those are my 3 learning targets. So the personal learning target that I identified the most with was the teacher candidate will be able to develop a classroom management plan and design a safe learning environment. So I've made progress towards this through learning. One way was through the social class quiz that we took and this discussion that followed, learning about the different types of students that may show up that may already have a disadvantage to learning. Maybe they don't even have a home. Maybe they have some, their home life isn't so great, or they don't have the support or the resources they need to be successful. So they're coming in at a disadvantage, but learning how to accept and welcome those students, but also hold an equal standard across all students in your classroom, and expecting, a certain level of participation, a certain level of commitment to wanting to learn. So I think that's very important, and you want to show. I think it's very important that you want to show equality through your instruction towards all of your students. And I think you mentioned this too, Amy, as well, when you were filming yourself and you wanted to see not only your expressions while you were teaching, but rather if you're standing in one spot more, favoring a certain location, or speaking out to certain students more. At least I think that's what you were doing. But that definitely drew attention to that. So I think that will absolutely inform my practice in trying to show equality throughout my classroom and through my instruction for all my students. Another way that I've learned how to design a safe learning environment is through the power of being able to get the parents on your side, and when referring to the behavior and the performance of their students in your classroom. So I learned this through the Rita Pearson video, My Mama Said, and how she started out by just showing, and I think it's important not only with the parents, but with the students in your class. And I think I will endeavor to do this, but to start out by just saying, hey, you know, I respect you. We're all different. I accept you. And I respect what you're trying to do. We're trying to be successful together. And start out by that, so then the teachers and the students both know that you're not trying to come in and tell them how to do things and your way is the only way, but you're trying to come to an agreement, trying to come together to promote the success, promote the learning, promote the appropriate behavior to be successful in school. So I thought that was very neat, and that was how I've learned that. Those qualities and how to be respectful and how to show acceptance. And I think also the Ruby Payne video, which was the 3 voices, it was like the student, daughter or son, and then the mom speaking, and then the teacher and the administrator. I thought that was super useful. When you think about how you're explaining or how you're dealing with a behavior or a subject, or you're explaining an activity or expectations you have for your students, you want to think about the voice that you have and where you're coming from and how you're presenting it. So I definitely I never really thought about that before prior to this. So I think that is a big way that I've made some steps towards achieving my personal learning goal. I think another way, the beginning of the learning goal says to develop a classroom management plan. And I've touched on this a lot throughout this video submission, but it was the workshopping and going through and creating the different drafts and understanding what constitutes each part of the management plan and how it can be successful. But then the designing a safe learning environment, I think, the top priorities or qualities that you can exude and that you want to have very obvious in your teaching is respect, showing respect for your students. And if you show them, and you expect respect in return. I think a big part of my classroom philosophy is, demonstrating and, explicitly explaining the expectations that I have for my students and giving them the chance to uphold that expectation I have for them and promoting them in different ways to want to do that. And I think, by showing respect, by, showing that it's a very accepting classroom, that it's okay to make mistakes, that it's important to be reflective on making mistakes and to understand what is contributing to their success and how they can use that more and what are the specific factors. I think those things are going to go into designing that safe learning environment where students feel that they are able to come in and to try and to, give it their all and be involved. Because otherwise, if you feel, stressed or you feel like you're different or people don't respect you, then you're not going to want to develop those relationships that are going to help you learn. And so I think that is so very important, and that's what I hope to communicate to my future students, and that will influence my future teaching. Brings me to advocating for your future teaching. As you reflect on your learning in this course, what did you do to enhance your learning, and is there anything you might do differently to increase learning even more? I think what I did to enhance my learning was to be very involved in the discussions. I like to ask questions to really understand and to make sure that I'm getting what we're talking about and that it's really resonating with me. But I think it's so equally important to listen to your peers and listen to the classmates and to you and to hear other sides of it and other reasonings as to why, because like I mentioned before, you are your experience. You only know what you have personally been involved with. So if you can find and understand the ability how to take your fellow classmates' perspective or experiences and take that into consideration, that's going to help you be a more well-versed student or teacher on the topic, and so you can have a better understanding of whatever it is we're trying to learn. So I think that really worked for me, is being involved in the discussions and to seeking out the information and asking questions to verify. If I might do differently, I think what I just need to work on is just being more concise, and being able to better communicate in less words, and maybe not saying the same thing but in different ways over and over again. So I think I might try to work on that a little bit more. I strive to do that every day in my life, but I think that's something that I could have maybe put some more effort towards, in saying less things, or saying more in less words, especially in my, not only in my my verbal speech, but also in my writing. So that's something I will work towards in the future. Based on learning to date, what could you enhance learning for your future students taking this course? And what could your instructor do? And what could students do? I think for future students, they need to know that it's a very interactive class. And I think it's, I really like the structure of it. I really like how it was not so much about the grades and about the the performance metrics, but rather showing that you've made progress. And I think that is amazing. So if future students can really understand that and find ways to exemplify their progress and their learning, then I think they're going to be very successful, if they can just shift that mindset. And I know it's hard because we're also like, well, what's the rubric, or what do I have to do this, or what do I have to do this, and I think it's very much just changing the way your mentality about school and about class. And everybody wants to succeed, but it's more about how you've learned and what processes are working and what progress you've made, rather than having the top marks the whole time, or what did I miss, or the certain little nitpicky things. So I think it's just shifting that mindset would be my biggest recommendation for future students. Instructor, Amy, I think you did a great job. I really appreciated the different ways you've showed us different management techniques, different activities, different ways of getting students involved in the class, and different ways of introducing activities, which has been really cool. I think it's just hard with my only recommendation, and it's nothing that really I think you can you can change, but I think it's just the 8-week so fast accelerated course. It's just so hard because with the 2 classes in one, you don't get time between the classes to really let the information resonate, and then it just seems like there's so much piled up to get to do. And I just wish I could have spent more time on a little bit more of the concepts, or had more time to reflect, or there's certain things like that. So I think it's not anything that you could help, but I think that would be my main constructive feedback, is that I would recommend this course to be not an accelerated 8 weeks, but a 16-week course. Or maybe recommending the students to taking it where you have it twice a week rather than once a week. That might help as well. Let's see, I think that's about it. I will include my references after this, and I appreciate you listening to me. I know this was a little bit longer, but there was lots of good stuff that I've learned in this class, and I really appreciate all the effort that you've put into it. I have definitely taken away a lot of new things that will inform my teaching in the future, and I'm excited to get to be able to use those. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in class.